Okay, welcome to this upgrade presentation on EIB Analytics. This is really designed for people who attended the upgrade webinars that we ran, and also for people who are running a la carte 2.13, 14, 15 and are considering upgrading. So I'm going to cover some of the new features. This video can be viewed in isolation, or it can also be viewed in conjunction with some product videos. So on some of the specific items we cover, I cover those in a lot more detail in the videos which you can view separately. Let's just remind ourselves a little bit about the product family before we talk about 2.18 specifically. Remember the whole idea of a la carte, which was rebranded EIB Analytics last year, is really talking about taking any data from any operational application, mashing that data together in a concise data warehouse or data mart or cube, and then making very fast access to that from within the comforts of Excel. That's pretty much the premise for the product to date. And we're going to look at how we expand on that. One of the things we want to do is certainly make sure the packaging is better as we move forward through time. And this is talking about, instead of having raw vanilla Excel workbooks or Excel dashboards where I have to go into Excel, do file open and then pick a file, not a great user experience for senior execs and managers, then how we can package those menus so that our users can just open up Excel, but instead of seeing Excel as we know it, seeing it as much more as an application environment. So I can just pick the reports or dashboards I'm interested at, or even third-party applications, and the system just goes away and fires those up for me. And that's a big theme in EIB Analytics 2.18. And then finally, how do we consume this information? We want to make sure we deliver this from your tool of choice. Now, up to 2.15, that's really been pretty much Excel, which is fantastic. Sort of 700 million users can't be wrong. But also we recognize that people want to do more. They want to do more in a couple of areas. One, they want to be able to do deep dive analytics, where they can see the sort of cause and effects really quickly in ways that we can't really do from within the Excel environment. And secondly, they also want to deploy those on more mobile devices. We are seeing more and more information on the web, and indeed on applications now, being consumed on iOS and Android mobile phones and tablets. And I guess MI is no different. So for management information here, we wanted to add this into the front, and the way that we've done that is we've linked up with Microsoft's Power BI product, so you can take any of the cubes that we have developed in EIB and make those readily accessible from within dashboards within Power BI, and that allows us to now widen the usage of the information and get it out to a much greater community. But let's not forget, where do we start? Most of the start points for some of you are really going to be on EIB Financial Analytics. We work on top of all the major Sage mid-market platforms, ranging from Sage X3 down to Sage 200. We also work on non-Sage platforms, in particular the shipping ERP system called ShipNet. We take the information from those financial systems, put them into a cube, and then we consume those in Excel or through Power BI in the offering. But what happens if we've got data we haven't seen before? A good example of this is we have one customer that wants to take actuals from their sales ledger, which is in a SQL Server database, and they want to mash that data up with monthly forecasts held by their managers in spreadsheets. So they're combining one SQL Server database with N Excel spreadsheets, adding those all together, and then being able to do actual versus forecast analysis across any part of their customer product portfolio. So clearly, using our EIB App Studio product, we need to be able to load data from different sources. So these are the sort of things that we can load. So in this case, we can load from the SQL Server database, we can load from the CSV files or Excel files that are being produced. We do that in a very visual way. So instead of writing loads and loads of code, a lot of the time we can actually build entire applications by just linking these visual objects together. And those visual objects handle a whole raft of things you need to do with data, i.e. how do you extract it from the source systems, how do you transform it so it's compatible with other data you're bringing in, i.e. the SQL Server Excel combination that we just spoke about. We can provide encryption into the data. So if you've got data in your MI that you're not sure you should have from a GDPR perspective, depending on where you're hosting it, then again you can actually encrypt this data and include it or exclude it accordingly. The big thing we do is have the ability to do error handling in this environment, and that's very important when you're looking at line of business applications such as hotels and insurance. But ultimately you end up with a clean data warehouse going through the EiB App Studio process, and then you can consume that in our own EiB Report Studio add-in from within Excel, through pivot tables, through Power BI, and even in through third-party BI applications such as Tableau. Now, as well as providing all of this, we also put an automation layer, and we've been building on that in EiB Analytics so that you can automate the whole process of going to get files, maybe FTPing the files first from another location before you can even start processing the MI, right the way through to automating all the documentation that you might want to produce on your data warehouses and your cubes, and indeed your designs for loading data accordingly. And last but not least, another big thing which is brand new is the ability to select a hosted option. Obviously you're welcome to deploy the software on premise, which is what you would have been doing with a la carte 2.15 and earlier versions of a la carte. But with EiB Analytics we have our own hosted option, and that is obviously optimized for analytics, and it's optimized in a way that we can't easily do on premise. So in other words, we can tweak things. We know exactly how we want the infrastructure to operate so that the whole relationship between, say, SQL Server Analysis Services, and even Power BI through the Enterprise Gateway is all optimized for automation and performance. So if you think you want to consider that option, then obviously please talk to us. So the themes for development, the main ones are improving reporting internally, improving visualization through use of things like Power BI, and indeed integration with things like Microsoft pivot tables and pivot charts in 2.18. We've made a big strides in the whole budgeting and forecasting planning process, allowing you to develop new versions of the forecast, increment that forecast, even enter data directly against that forecast. All of that has happened in 2.18, and obviously we're allowing you wider deployment through the range of web-based applications and indeed browser stroke mobile applications that you can deploy on iOS or Android tablets and phones. Now these are all the things we're doing on the front end, but to be honest, none of those really matter at all unless we continue to develop EiB's core focus on how do we make sure that no matter what we end up visualizing, then we make sure we have our strengths in the business logic that underpins these reports and dashboards, and the data validation that underpins these reports and dashboards. So in finance, business logic can be things like the statement or structure designer, where we're allowing you to rejig the P&Ls and balance sheets in ways that you hadn't originally envisaged. So you can actually perhaps produce statutory P&Ls, or you can produce investor P&Ls, or you can produce bank P&Ls, or you can do even the sort of the sort of parent company P&Ls, where the parent company might have their ERP data in another ERP such as SAP or something, and you want to produce P&L reports in the same structure as the group ERP system uses. That's all possible from the business logic that we introduce. In insurance, you might have the business logic and data validation, where you want to be able to create earned premium calculations based on many different transaction types, and you want to reject erroneous data so that you don't end up start doing these fancy dashboards only to find out that you're providing dashboards on erroneous data. So this is our core IP, it's our core strengths, and it's strengths we continue to build on with EiB Analytics. So if I look at the main areas of this, is a big release, and what I'm going to try and do is in the associated videos that accompany this, there are detailed presentations on all those areas in blue here. There are a couple of areas here that we can't obviously show very easily. One is the application hosting, because obviously it looks exactly the same as if you're running it on premise, but it's just behind the scenes it is more automated and more optimized. and also things like PCI compliance. PCI compliance is something you don't see, but can be important for some of our organizations. So what happens at the moment, if you have our front end in Excel and you have the back end in SQL Server or Analysis Services, then if you had some sort of sniffer technology, if someone was trying to hack your system and they hacked into the communication between Excel and the back end, in a la carte 2.15 and below, in theory, they could actually get into that data and find out the data you are passing backwards and forwards between the client and server. Using TLS 1.2 standard from Microsoft, then none of that is possible. If you tap into that now, sure, you will get information coming back, but all that information will be encrypted, so effectively you'll just get a ton of garbage. So for those customers then who are more security conscious, then PCI compliance is a big thing, but you don't see it. In fact, it's very much what you don't see, I guess, is the key there. Now, if you want to look at those areas in blue in real detail, i.e. see the changes we've made in the product itself, then I suggest you stop looking at this video and look at each associated video with budgeting and forecasting, Power BI, right the way through to EiB App Studio. There is a separate video on every one of those. If you just want a brief overview of what we're doing, then continue watching this presentation. I'm not going to demo any of this, I'm just going to talk about it in this presentation. So the first key theme here is budgeting and forecasting. Big changes in 2018. Why? Because we are seeing definitely a big requirement here. We're seeing requirements change. 2 or 3 years ago, nobody wanted forecasting. Now, majority of our prospects are talking about a forecasting element. A majority of our prospects now don't just want to do a forecast in a year. They want to do 3, 4, in a very recent case, 11 forecasts, i.e. after month 1 right the way through to month 12, they want to do a forecast every single month. And that's backed up by research from PwC, where they're saying that 69% of financial execs interviewed were saying budgeting and forecasting is a key improvement priority in finance. And why don't people do it at the moment? Well, I think it's really simple. It's just been too hard. If people have lots of cost centers or departments or both, and they have to manually consolidate that information, typically using Excel, then that's a real ball's ache, because you've got to kind of get the spreadsheets back from each of the cost center managers, you've got to put those into a central place, you've got to consolidate that information together, and you've then got to then do the reporting as a result of that consolidation. We're trying to make that really, really simple. So in terms of what does that look like? First of all, we have the capability of generating a new budget forecast. So if you think, when you look at the version dimension in EiB Financial Analytics or a la carte, typically what you see in there is actuals or budgets or a forecast. Is you can create numerous forecasts. So I could create forecast V1, forecast V2, forecast V3, etc. And I can tell the system how I want the default version to be created. So imagine I'm in month 5 and I might say, well, I want to create a new version of the forecast, and by default I want that to be 5 months worth of actuals, because we've now had 5 months, and I want the remaining 7 months to be the budget from Sage or whatever accounting system I'm using. And of course, now if I say that and generate a forecast, then what will happen from a year-to-date perspective is after month 5, it will effectively be adding 5 months worth of actuals to each month's budget to produce a outturn position at the end of month 6 through to 12. Now, once I've done this, you can say, well, okay, but it isn't just the budgets I want taken forward. I then want to tweak the budgets so that the budgets in the remaining months actually become a forecast. And one of the things we can do from there is allow you to then directly enter data into those buckets, so you can change and tweak the numbers and then see the effects in near real time. So I can create new versions of the forecast, and once I have processed the cube, then obviously that will update and I'll have a new version of my forecast in my cube that I can contrast against my actuals and my budgets. I can also clear the version. I can clear an entire forecast. If I load a load of data in and realize I've done the wrong thing, I can actually keep the name of the forecast but actually wipe it. Or I might have made a mistake in 1 or 2 periods and I want to wipe those periods. I can do both, as you can see from the dialogues on screen. Once I've cleared those, I can, as I said, enter information into the forecast directly. So just using standard EIB analytics reports, the reports that you've kind of designed, I guess, in previous versions of a la carte from 2.15 downwards, I can now enable those reports, and I can allow users to selectively enter information in as a forecast, and it will do that in near real time. And once I've done that, I can then obviously, as you can see in this report here, contrast my actuals to a revised forecast, have a variance to forecast, and then variance to my original budget to get a complete picture. Now the process behind this is quite complex. I'm not going to go through the detail, but this really combines, I guess, the best of intellectual property from Microsoft and from Excel in Business. Microsoft does provide a write back table for the cube, and what that allows you to do is, as you make a change to a cost center or a department, then without having to reprocess the cube, I can effectively see those changes in the reports nigh on instantaneously. However, there is some flaws in the standard Microsoft technology, and the main flaw is that only works if you don't delete anything. So in other words, if you have a forecast against a cost center or department, and then you subsequently in your accounting system delete that cost center or delete that department, and that gets then changed in the cube, if you've got any forecasts at all in the write back table that relate to those now deleted cost centers or departments, it makes the entire write back table invalid. And of course that's not really good, because if you've made loads of changes and then delete one cost center, you've effectively lost every single change you've made to the forecast. And that's where we've obviously added our own IP here to manage that process, so that of course doesn't happen, and we keep our own audit trail here so we know what things you've deleted and we can tidy as we go. Now once we've made those changes, one of the things you can do, I think, and linking, I guess, the changes we've done to budgeting and forecasting and the changes we've made to visualization, i.e. the integration with Power BI, is you can then kind of see those changes near on real time. Now Power BI is very, very powerful, but what we've done is you can put these against the cubes that we've actually created, and you can now start to see cause and effect relationships. And if you want to understand what I mean by that, then please have a look at the Power BI video that we've done as part of this series. Now obviously, because we are using this technology day in, day out, we've also come up with some templates that we think are easy for your end users to navigate. So you can see here where we've put what would have been the criteria, I guess, in EIB Report Studio reports. We've now kind of mapped a similar thing in here into Power BI, so you can easily change the parameters for the reports. And you can see now that we're using a common set of color standards as well, just to get consistency. This last report here actually does show, or could potentially show, the cause and effect stuff here. This is where we are actually looking at different aspects of the business. So this is a hotel analytics dashboard here, but what I could actually do here is I'm looking at event managers, looking at event names, event types, and event status. I could actually click on a cancelled or definite booking here on this dashboard at the bottom left, and it would show the proportion of definite bookings in all other three charts. And that's sort of stuff that you just can't do in Excel, and that's why we're really excited about adding Power BI visualization into 2.18. Now, like everything, there is a downside, and if you look at the red note at the bottom left there, is if you are using SQL Standard Edition, which I suspect most of you will be, SQL Server Standard Edition does not support this until SQL Server 2.17. If you're using an earlier version of SQL, you can go back as far as 2.14 and 2.16, but you have to have the Business Intelligence or Enterprise editions of SQL Server for that to actually work. The other thing we've done is try to recapture some of the real estate that you have on your screen. If you have a report with lots of criteria, so some of our customers might have line of business applications in insurance, hotels, or shipping, where they might have 15 dimensions available for change at the top of a report. Now, bearing in mind with a la carte 215 and below, each dimension will always take one line. So if you had 15 dimensions you wanted the users to be able to change, then effectively you've lost 15 lines worth of real estate in your report, where the user can pick any one of those dimensions and changes it. And we've changed the way we do things so that you can compress all this into a single line. So you can see there that instead of having multiple lines to change the criteria, you can see here that we have one line, and when you double click on that you can change multiple dimensions from just one line of descriptions about what you can actually change. So that's really quite important, and there are various options that you can do to change the layout there, including including it as the report headers as well. So you can have a summary view, and you can also put it into the report header itself. So if you have any doubts or you want to see how you do that in more detail, then please again look at the associated video with report headers. One of the must-have features, and if I was on a la carte 215 or below, I would genuinely upgrade just for this feature. This is incredibly powerful. This is the train of thought analysis that we've added in. And what this is all about, it's about providing a set of standard reports as you do now. In this case we are looking at a profit and loss variance report from EiB Financial Analytics, and we're saying, well, what sort of questions could the user ask next? So in other words, if I'm looking at a P&L here, I can change the cost center and I can change the department. I can change each one of those in this report. But what happens if I saw something out of kilter with cost of sales or UK sales, and I thought I want to home in on UK sales and I want to break that down by cost center, I want to break that down by department, I want to break that down by company? Yes, I could say, well, if you know how to use our report layout panel, then you could easily drag and drop dimensions around and do that straight away. But come on, let's be honest, how many of your senior management users would be able to do that? So we wanted to make that really, really simple. And we wanted to avoid you having to design reports for every possible combination. There's no point in me saying, okay, you've got a cube with 50 odd dimensions and you need to design now reports that handles every eventuality of that. So if your user asks to look at this by this, then you can refer them to a particular report. That is never ever going to happen. So here what happens is we can second guess what the user wants to do, and then we can build reports on the fly. And when I say we can build reports, the software will automatically do that based on the criteria you select. So in this example, I could perhaps home in on UK sales in my rows, right click on that, and then if you look at the options I have available here on the right click menu, I can analyze by companies, by cost center, by department, and so forth. So if I picked analyze by company, you'll see now that the system has homed in on UK sales and now has broken the rows down by company. And I can go further here. I could now go to one of the columns, in this case actual year to date in this example, and now analyze by department, and that will build me another new report. And now I've got companies down the side and departments in the columns. I've homed in on UK sales, I've homed in on actual year to date. Now all these new reports have been generated by the software on the fly, and they're all bona fide reports in their own right. So if I took that last report or the second one or both and said, you know what, I don't want to have to keep doing right click, they're actual real reports I want to use going forward, then I can literally just go to the EiB Analytics ribbon, save as new report, and I've now created a new report for next month. And I didn't have to be an expert in the software. I have no idea how the report layout panel works, no idea, I have no interest. I just want to be able to produce these reports really, really quickly. So again, if you're interested in this, please have a look at the separate train of thought analysis video, because in my mind I would upgrade just for this feature on its own. The next thing we handle, for those of you particularly who have line of business applications, is larger dimension handling. I think in a la carte 215 and below, if you had a large dimension, so let's say you had something like policies in insurance and you had say 100,000 policies, then in 215 or below, if you double clicked on policy number in the criteria, then you would get that first dialog box come up where you can see greater than 500 members, click to find the members. And then when you click on that, it would bring that second dialog up where you say, I want to find all policies starting with XYZ01. You'd click on find, it would return the number of members, and you could then pick those members for the criteria. Now, of course, you can still do the finding if you've got millions of items. Then obviously you wouldn't want to be able to scroll through millions of items anyway. But if you say had a couple of thousand and you wanted to scroll through quickly and see the sort of format of the policy numbers, then in 218 we would render that. So there's the difference between 215 and 218. In 215 you would get the dialogue. In 218 you would never get the dialogue. We would always render the full list of, in this case, policy numbers, and you could scroll through there, or you could do find. You can see the little binoculars there on the right hand side. If you want to do find and do the same as you did in 215, then you can. But this offers a much nicer user experience and a much more consistent user experience in 218. Next feature is multi-versioning of reports. I think myself, and I'm sure you have, and certainly my colleagues in our professional services department would vouch for, is often we go to a customer site, we would click on the gallery, we would look in the financial report section of the gallery, and we might have P&L, we might have P&L V2, we might have P&L V3 with Chloe's changes, P&L V3 with Chloe and Fred's changes, and we have no idea what version of the P&L is current and what those other versions of the P&L mean. And the gallery is completely cluttered because, as well as having all those different versions for the P&L, I've also got all those different versions for the balance sheet or another version of the P&L, and I've got now a gallery that's got 40-50 names in it, of which probably only 4 or 5 are valid, but the others are just different examples of work in progress. So I thought we need to do a lot better than that. We need to tidy that up. So we actually now support multi-versioning of the same report. So when you save a report away, it will obviously, the first time you do that, it will create a version, and under the gallery now is a new property that says version, and by default obviously the first version will be V1, and you can carry on overwriting V1 if that's what you want to do, or you can do save as and create new version. So now it will use the same name, but you can create that now as version 2, 3, 4, or whatever you want to actually call it. But the difference is if you create a new version of a particular report name, you will only ever see that report name once in the gallery. But that doesn't mean to say you can't access previous releases. So in other words, you could be having your users use V1 of the report in their menus, so they're consuming that in their application, but in parallel you are developing V2, and you can then go back, so your users now can launch a particular version. You can see here, if I put load alternate version, it will give me a full history. So if I had 15 versions of this particular report, I would have 15 options in the drop down on the left. So this is a lot nicer way of actually storing your reports and managing your reports. Another thing we've added, this didn't exist in 2.15 below, is the ability to create packaged menus. In 2.15 the best we could do is allow you to create raw Excel spreadsheets, insert icons on those spreadsheets just using standard Excel functionality, and then to provide the links to the reports in the gallery, we had an insert gallery link function in a la carte 2.15 that could say, okay, I want to call from this part of Excel, from this icon in Excel, I want you to call the P&L report by time from the gallery. So in 2.15 you could achieve the same as you could in 2.18, but it was all manual. It was all, you have to create the spreadsheets, you have to create the links, you have to manage the order of the items in there, and if people suddenly say I want 3 new menu icons and I want those on row 2, you had to manually move all the stuff around and manage the repercussions of that. There is a new ribbon option under EIB administration. There is a new icon called Menu Creator, and this allows you to generate menus. So it's a set of forms that you complete, and those forms then build the XLSX menus that your users consume. And you can see they all look very nice. They can call reports from the gallery, they can call URLs to website links or perhaps to your Power BI service if you're using that in 218. They can call executables, and they can even pop up the gallery. So if you kind of thought, well, I've got a set of 10 reports in there, but for all else I just want the user to be able to select from the gallery, then there is an option to actually say, okay, pop up the gallery, and don't just open the gallery up from the top level, open it up in a certain level, i.e. I might want to say under finance, I only want to open up the gallery at the standard reports level, and you can do all of that and the system will go away and generate the files. Now, like all things here, there is a separate demonstration, a separate video for the menu creator software, so please take a look at that if you're interested in this functionality. Last but not least, EiB App Studio. This was a big addition to a la carte 215, and we've massively built on that in EiB Analytics. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to take data from anywhere, and using our EiB App Studio software, take you through a logical process on how do we transform that raw, uncleansed data into a full MI application that you can access from Excel and or Microsoft's Power BI. Now there are a whole raft of objects. Here is the full range we've added here. And again, I am not going to go through all of those, you'll be pleased to know, in this presentation, but there is a separate EiB App Studio demo as part of this series, so please check that video out if you want to see how we can take some raw data, in the example we use I think from Excel, and transform that into a fully working application using EiB App Studio, EiB Report Studio, and then indeed visualizing that new application through Microsoft's Power BI. You'll see that it's a very visual way of putting apps together, and the actual demonstration will show you that. For those of you interested, there is a whole raft of features included in this PowerPoint. There is a PowerPoint, this PowerPoint that accompanies the video is available separately, so if you want to download that and peruse each item in detail, you can see there is a hell of a lot that's been added. So this is the more specific feature functionality that we've added, and you can see there is a hell of a lot there. Okay, so hopefully what you've taken from this, one is EiB Analytics is a big release. It's a big release in terms of functionality, it's a big release in changes, it's a big release in user experience, it's a big release in budgeting and forecasting, it's a big release in data visualization through things like Power BI. It has been commercially available since December 2017, so it's also well proven now out there in the market. If you are moving, then I guess a few things to consider. First of all, our support policy hasn't changed. Our support policy at Excel in Business has always been to support the current major release and the current major release -1. What does that mean in English? That means that at this point in time, the only two versions of the products that are officially supported are EiB Analytics that we've just been discussing, and the previous a la carte release, which is a la carte 2015. That means if you're on a la carte 2.14, 13, or heaven forbid even below 2.13, then those products are no longer supported. It doesn't mean we'll ignore you. If you raise tickets on those systems in the support system, then we will try and support you best we can. But, and the big but, is if we find a bug or an issue of some new Microsoft software that has caused something not to work in those products, then we can no longer code fix 2.14 or below, which means if we have to code fix something, we would force you at that point in time to upgrade to EiB Analytics. Now that's not obviously an ideal position to be in, so given the functionality that's available, I would suggest you plan and get upgraded to a supported release. Now the good news, if you are on a la carte 2.15, and even if you're on a la carte 2.14 to many degrees, is that it's not a big upgrade process. So it's very easy to upgrade from 14, 15 through to 18. If you're on 2.13 and you have our financial intelligence, which has now become financial analytics, that is a bigger move. We did some massive changes to the statements structure designer between 2.13 and 2.14, and obviously if you're trying to leap between 13 to 18, then those changes have to be applied along the way. So it's almost like a double whammy, upgrading effectively to 14 functionality and then upgrading to 18. So it takes a bit longer, and the cost unfortunately is a bit higher. So if you're on an earlier version, then please talk to us about the ramifications of that. If you're on 14.15, then again get in touch with us so we can plan your release and get you up to EiB analytics.